It was in early November of 1997 that a series of very strange sessions led a child psychologist in Maine to contact the authorities. It began when a patient of his began to tell him about one of their friends. This friend being imaginary as far as both the psychiatrist and the boy's parents were concerned. He called his friend Mr. Smile and would talk about him at great length during some sessions. The boy called him Mr. Smile both. The boy called him Mr. Smile because he would always be smiling and because he was around the boys, said everything felt happy. He said that there was a feeling of everything being okay. The boy in question was being treated for serious issues to do with anger and depression, but when Mr. Smile was around, he said that all the anger and sadness seemed to just disappear. He said that Mr. Smile wouldn't speak but rather just stand there, at the foot of his bed. He smelled like candy floss, and just by being there he made the boy feel calm and safe. The psychiatrist assumed this imaginary friend was some sort of coping mechanism the boy had developed to deal with the problems at home that he had led to his violent temper, and thought nothing more of it until another patient, a girl of about 9 years old, also began talking about her imaginary friend, Mr. Smile, and a boy of 7, a boy of 12, and then another girl of 11. On and close to 15 separate patients all began to talk to him about Mr. Smile. The first few he'd put down to coincidence. After all, many children have imaginary friends, and the name and description of Mr. Smile were just generic enough that it didn't concern him too much at first. But as more and more patients told him about Mr. Smile, he began to grow concerned. He asked more questions, every single one of them described in the exact same way, using the exact same words. Now there was no way that all of these children could be in contact with each other. 5 of them, for instance, were currently being homeschooled according to their parents when we spoke to them, never really even left the house except when it was to accompany them shopping trips and the like. There was no way that every single one of these kids could have rehearsed or prepared their statements together, which led him to a deeply disturbing conclusion. He spoke privately with each of the children's parents, one at a time. He avoided disclosing too much information, but told them that something troubling had cropped up in multiple sessions with various patients, that he believed that there was a chance that your child was at risk. He asked for their permission to discuss the matter. The authorities and the parents gave their consent, provided they were kept in the loop as to what was going on. And so, over the course of the next week, the police came and talked to the children about their friend. They asked for details about his appearance, which they couldn't seem to describe apart from the smile, and that he was not like them. Now he got into their house, and anything he said or did while he was there, because by this point the psychiatrist, the parents, and the police were all convinced that Mr. Smile was quite real and quite dangerous. The authorities had checked to make sure there were no known predators living in the area, which they had confirmed was not the case. But it was quite clear that whoever this Mr. Smiles was a real person who had been sneaking into the homes of these children at night. None of the children claimed to know how he got in. They just said that they would just wake up and he'd be there at the foot of their bed. Sometimes they said he wouldn't be singing. None of the children claimed to know how he got in. They said that he would just wake up and he'd be there at the foot of their bed. Sometimes they said that he would be singing something, but not in English. It sounded like a lullaby, they said. It made them feel safe. Finally, the children were asked to draw Mr. Smile, as they couldn't put into words how he looked. Each and every one of the children picked up a red crayon and proceeded to color the entire page until it was just a rectangle of red. When asked about this, they insisted that they had drawn Mr. Smile. When asked where his head, arms, and legs were, they would insist that they had drawn those. They claimed that they had drawn a perfect picture of the man at the foot of their bed, and when they were told that they had simply colored in the page and not drawn anything at all, they became deeply angry, and feeling that they were being accused of lying or insisting that what they had drawn was a picture of the man they had seen. Acting more on a hunch than anything else, the psychiatrist decided to show one of the colored in rectangles to the various kids and asked them what it was. Each and every single one of them, with no knowledge of what the picture was supposed to be or what was drawn in it, and with no knowledge that the other children had spoken to about it, the subject even existed, replied that it was a picture of Mr. Smile. Cameras and baby monitors were placed in the kids' rooms so that they could be monitored. Many of the parents simply stopped sleeping altogether, staying up all night staring at the screens that displayed where their children slept. At no point did anyone enter or exit the bedrooms. No sound except for them snoring and occasionally talking in their sleep were heard over the baby monitors. There was no sign of Mr. Smile. After almost 2 weeks of this, many of them began to doubt that Mr. Smile had ever existed. Other psychiatrists hence have put the whole thing down to some strange shared delusion that, while it couldn't be explained, yet it did not have any biases in reality. Some suggested that maybe this whole Mr. Smile thing had its biases in a TV show or film that the children had all watched, leading them to all dream of something similar. Then, one of the boys went missing. The camera in his room had gone dark at around 2 in the morning. His mother had run to check in on him only to find his room empty. It had literally taken her less than a minute to run up to his room. There was no possible way for him to leave or be taken out of her sight in that time it took her to leave her bedroom and run towards his. But he was gone. She said that there was a smell like cotton candy in the room. The search for the boy turned up nothing. No one else had seen anything strange or unusual around the home before or during the disappearance, and no trace of him was ever found. It was less than a week later that one of the girls who had spoken to Mr. Smile vanished as well. Then another of the boys. One by one, each of them began to disappear until only 4 remained. The 4 remaining children began to talk about how Mr. Smile and his friends were going to be taken to them away soon. When asked about these friends, they talked about how Mr. Smile lived with the other smiling men in the happy place, that he would take him there soon. He said that there were lots of people there already, and that in the happy place, everything was beautiful. They said that they knew about it because Mr. Smiles talked to them in their heads, because he couldn't talk like other people did, and that he wouldn't show them pictures in their head of the place they were going. Things began to get increasingly disturbing. After a few weeks, the children began complaining of headaches and nausea. Their schools reported they had begun to suffer hallucinations, and 2 of them started complaining that they didn't like the place that Mr. Smile was showing them anymore. One began screaming for half an hour, acting as if they were having a fit, and screaming for the colors to stop, that the colors were horrible and that they needed them to go away. One of the children claimed that Mr. Smile was talking to them in their head all the time now and was telling them things, terrible things, but that they couldn't talk about it because their parents would know about the terrible things too. The psychiatrist asked him to write down what Mr. Smile was saying, promising that he would show it to no one. Managing to gain the trust of one of the boys enough that he agreed. The contents of the book are only known to him and to the authorities, but whatever anyone involved has been asked about it, they just get real quiet and quickly find an excuse to change the subject. The children stopped sleeping. Footage from the security cameras showed them sitting bolt upright, their eyes unblinking, just staring at the wall without moving or making a sound. Sedatives didn't even do nothing. One of the girls began cutting strange circular mark into her skin while 2 of the boys ceased communication in English altogether. The language they spoke was never identified, and despite numerous people being asked to listen to them, they couldn't translate what they were saying. However, by the start of 1999, All four of the children had vanished into thin air. What a story. So it looks like there's a bit of a trend going on lately on the channel where I'm just reading people who either have, I guess, big smiles or smiles in their name. You know, Smiling Man, Mr. Wide Mouth. But don't worry, the next story that we'll do, definitely not going to be someone with the smile. So, anyways, speaking of which, let's talk about the story. First off, this story is wow. It is good. It is really, really fucking good. Like honestly, I think this is the one of the best that I've read on the channel so far, and this is much one of the newer ones. This came out like in early of 2020, but Jesus Christ, this story. All right, first off, the psychiatrist. I like how he's interviewing one kid, looking after one kid, and then he starts looking after multiple kids. And at first it seems like, oh, okay, maybe it's a local imagination character, because at first it was just six kids that described the same way, and they're like, okay, they don't go too much into detail, it's just a guy with a big smile. But then as he interviews more kids, sooner or later he then realizes, okay, this is impossible. There is no way that all these kids can describe the same person with the same name. And I like that. I like that where the psychiatrist first tries to explain it, but the more he like goes into this, it just spirals out of control, and there's like no explanation. And I love that. I love that. I like it when stories try to build that up. At first it seems everything normal, but then it just all hell breaks loose the more he dives into it. Not to mention, I like how this story doesn't try to include any, sort of religion sort of take on it. They don't. Never in this story is religion or any magic or fantasy type of explanation is ever brought. It's just unexplained. Even at the end, or with the police report of the missing kids, they just say that most likely this Mr. Smile manifestation, it was just a you know part of a TV show that every kid's probably saw on their local TV. And as for the explanation for the missing kids, there isn't one. And that's what I like, is that they don't ever try to go off the deep end and try to say, oh, it was the devil in disguise and he crawled up from the dreams, and the more you believe in him, the more real it gets, or some bullshit like that. I love how they don't do it. They try to keep it real. I love that. Not to mention the way the kids sort of describe him, where they all like see or how they all draw him, a big red rectangular. And how I love how the psychiatrist grabs the same drawings. Keep in mind, the kids are all in their separate rooms. He shows them the same drawings, and they all know what it is, and that's so creepy. That's what I think, or that's what I like about the story, is that the use of kids, it's very effective. They don't go over the top with it. It's very effective. I like also how the story just flows naturally. We see this is presented in a way of those BuzzFeed unexplained or unsolved mystery types of videos, where we see the timeline events. How it started with one kid, with his erratic behavior, and then it just transpired into like a terrible missing person's case. I love the timelines. Everything is so neatly, it doesn't try to overstay its welcome. It doesn't, give unnecessary details or filler. No, it gives the details it needs, while still, leaving us to figure out some things. Like the part, how do you explain the camera going out and then the parent running to the kid's room under 1 minute, and yet the kid is gone. Nobody broke in, all the windows are closed, the kid is gone. And how do you explain for the smell, of candy, in the room? How do you explain it? I love that. I love how it's presented in a way where like this, something like this could something happen. I mean, there's been stuff that's happened, in this world that are kind of, unexplained. So something like this is plausible, in real life. I know that's crazy to sound, but this genuinely feels like it's an actual real mystery. That's how good it was written. And I do like how when you're reading, especially towards the end, there's a sense of, secrecy, that the psychiatrist knows more than what's than he's leading on to. especially towards the end when they said that there was a journal written by one of the kids, and only the authorities and the psychiatrist knows as to what was in that journal is a mystery. And I do like that how us the reader, we have to kind of keep guessing what's in that, uh, journal. What was written on it? What did the kids see? And I like how towards the end, uh, they try their best to save the kids. By all means, they take the most extreme ways by trying to keep them locked in a room and watching them 24/7. But in the end, Mr. Smile prevails and unfortunately tortures the kid and takes him wherever who knows where. But yeah, anyways, honestly, I recommend checking out this story. This story is really, really good. And with that being said, thank you guys for watching. Like, comment, subscribe. Don't forget to check out the other videos along with all my other social medias. And with that being said, I am out.